Yes, people, what's happening? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another live stream. And today, Gareth Southgate's much anticipated England squad for the Qatar World Cup in a couple of weeks' time was announced. To be fair, most of it was already leaked before the 2 p.m. announcement. But yeah, a couple of surprise inclusions, potentially with the likes of Conor Gallagher being involved and some names missing out that caused a little bit of controversy in terms of the likes of Fikayo Tomori. Ivan Toney could perhaps consider himself a little bit hard done by as well. But yeah, to get into all the talking points and get into all this, delighted to be joined by Euro expert Alex. Thanks for joining me, mate. Really appreciate it. I'm just going to bring up the squad on the screen now. Let me just find it. Any standouts for you? Obviously, James Maddison makes the squad, which was kind of a big talking point in terms of everyone thinking he should go. Was Southgate going to pick him? Starting with Maddison himself, obviously in superb form for Leicester this season. I think only De Bruyne and Haaland, and I think in the last 18 months have got more goal or assist contributions than him. So everyone was calling for him to be in. Only one England cap though, but he's now in the squad. Do you think his inclusion, obviously fully justified, is more because Southgate kind of had to pick him rather than picking him because he wanted to?
It might be a case of that, because it is, while Southgate does like his favourites, I don't think he wants to create a toxic atmosphere. And if Maddison, I guess if Maddison hadn't earned a place in the England setup, then what more could he have possibly done? I do think it's quite telling that he's been counted as a forward, not a midfielder, which you would typically think he is. So maybe that's sort of an indication of where Southgate's thinking is, that he'll take James Maddison, but it's not at the cost of... He won't be starting over a Mason Mount or a Jude Bellingham. He will be more of a luxury option in the forward line rather than someone who he's going to trust with tactical work in midfield.
I mean, do you think his inclusion could see Southgate to maybe switch from that kind of 3-4-3 system? Because we know Maddison really operates as a 10, but for Leicester this season, he's been playing off the right and obviously finding himself kind of in that number 10 position at times as well. Do you think for England, when I don't think he'll start many games, so I'm sure he'll have an impact from the bench. Do you expect him to be deployed down that right-hand side like he has been for Leicester if he does play?
That's an interesting question. He could be. I guess the issue with Maddison, especially with him starting, is you would expect him to occupy a lot of similar areas that Harry Kane would want to go into. And Harry Kane's speciality is that, he's not going to get picked up dropping deep, and he wants runners in behind to, link up with. So having a Maddison in there effectively doing the same job might, muddy the lines, if that was so. So I think you're right. I think he'll be more of a substitute option, James Maddison. But in terms of the formation, I reckon he will... I think you're more likely to see him come on the right wing. But he won't be drifting inside. I think it'll be a lot more of a... You stay wide and you try and get crosses in. It'll probably be if England's chasing a game and Southgate wants someone with that magic to unlock a defence, take a good set piece, and bring something up that the rest of the squad can't. So I think he offers things in the squad that other players can't. That's why he's in the team. But as you've kind of hinted at, I don't think we'll be seeing him start, and I don't think we'll be seeing him play at the detriment of players like Kane and who would occupy the same space as he would.
Yeah, no, I think it's an exciting option to have. As you say, I think for me, it would have been criminal not to pick him because, if he wasn't picked for this squad, when is he ever going to be picked for England? He's arguably in the form of his career. So he almost by default had to be picked. In terms of other players that have been picked, I don't think many people would have had Conor Gallagher in their final 26-man squad for the World Cup. We've seen Gallagher obviously get called up, earn caps for England. Not many of them, admittedly, but I'm delighted from a Chelsea perspective that he has made the cut. I think he's under Graham Potter this season, particularly. I think he's performed well when he's been given the opportunity, and Potter obviously trusts him a bit more than perhaps Thomas Tuchel did. But in terms of making the World Cup squad, I have to say I'm quite surprised. I think Southgate probably he alluded to it in his kind of press conference after the squad was announced. He likes the way that he presses the ball, his energy in the midfield. How surprised are you that Conor Gallagher's been picked? And what do you feel that he can offer to this side? Because he kind of does come across as a very Southgate-like player.
Yeah, that was one of my immediate reactions, thinking, what is Conor Gallagher doing in there? But I do remember how when you played Arsenal last weekend. Sorry to bring that back up for you, but
Yeah, that was a painful time.
a lot of Arsenal fans were very thankful that Gallagher wasn't playing because they said that when he played for Crystal Palace both games last season, he was a key instrument in kind of shutting down Partey and playing a tactical role, really, as Southgate kind of said, pressing hard and marking hard. And maybe that's where he could come into play for England. I remember Loftus-Cheek having a sort of a similar role for England when he played at 2018 World Cup, more of a unique role. What you might see Gallagher do is see England line up at a 5-3-2 and be a player who has the energy to get forward, but primarily will be more of a defensive player in a sense, not sitting back, but defending from the front, especially. And it gives England another option.
Yeah, no, I was a little bit surprised to see him in there, but I mean, I don't expect him to start necessarily. But you look at those midfielders, and you would expect it to be Declan Rice and Jude Bellingham playing in that pivot. I don't think Jordan Henderson is going to see many minutes at all. I think he's purely there for what he brings off the pitch. Obviously, Calvin Phillips is an interesting one. Obviously, was a mainstay in that midfield with Declan Rice that was at the Euros, playing week in, week out for Leeds. Looks a really good player. He's played 50-odd minutes for Man City this season. Hasn't started a single game. To be expected. I didn't think he was really going to play much for City anyway. Yes, he's been injured, but to have only featured 3 times before the World Cup it's less than ideal. He's probably going in a little bit undercooked. And I think I'd be disappointed, but I also expect it that Southgate will just revert to type. And if Phillips is anywhere near fit to play, he'll just play him and Rice because he knows it.
Yeah, that is an interesting point. And as an England fan, I'm not sure I'd want to see that. I do want to see Bellingham start, but he's so young, I can understand why you wouldn't play him. I guess with Phillips, I think if he's at any other club and he hadn't been playing, he wouldn't have got into this team. But it might be from the standpoint of Pep Guardiola being Manchester City manager, someone who regularly, when he makes a new signing, but beds them in very, very slowly. I remember when João Cancelo played his first season for Manchester City, there were rumours sparking up that he was already going to be out because he just had so little game time. And a year later, he was bedded in. So I don't think Phillips is someone who's like failing on the training ground or anything. I think he's a player who's probably bedding into Pep's method slowly and is still getting tested, even if it's not in game time. So I'm not too against him going, but I would prefer Rice and Bellingham to start because I think that's the best ideal option.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in terms of other midfielders that perhaps maybe can feel a little bit hard done by, do you think Ruben? I know Loftus-Cheek has not really been thought of in England squads for a while now, but there was a bit of a clamour for him after he was playing well for a few games. Yes, admittedly, the last few weeks he's not played as well, which could have put the final nail in his chances. But do you think he can potentially be a little bit hard done by in terms of what he offers? Do you think Gallagher offers a bit more than him potentially? I mean, and maybe someone like James Ward-Prowse as well. I mean, I'm not a massive fan of Ward-Prowse. He missed out on the Euros as well. But set pieces could be important. I mean, I don't know if it's a bit harsh to call him a set piece merchant, but I don't think he's been very good for Southampton at all this season. Do you think Loftus-Cheek and Ward-Prowse could feel hard done by?
Definitely not Ward-Prowse, in my opinion. I don't think he offers enough away for set pieces. And if you bring in James Maddison, I don't think you need a set piece guy because you have Maddison. I think he does that, not quite as well. Ward-Prowse, when I've looked into the stats before, is like, along with Messi, even above him, the best free kick taker in Europe over the past, I think, 4 or 5 years. But with Loftus-Cheek, that is something I reckon it would have been a toss-up between him and Gallagher because they offer different things, and Gallagher's much more like a little bullet racing around, where Loftus-Cheek is a silky ball carrier, and someone who's ranks really high in sort of progressive carry stats. And I do think that is actually quite interesting that he's not gone. Maybe it is a little bit of a form thing, but he was a favourite under Southgate, so I'm a bit surprised by that as well.
I'm a little bit surprised. I mean, I've got to be honest. I don't think the midfield options are that great. If we're being perfectly honest, I think Henderson is over the hill. Gallagher is obviously raw, and you don't know what you're going to get from him, but he'll be obviously bang up for it and always put a shift in. Calvin Phillips has hardly played any football. Obviously Rice is great, and so is Jude Bellingham. So you're really looking at it, and apart from Rice and Bellingham, the others in that pool are unknown quantities. Not all unknown quantities at international level, but it's a little. I think it could be a little bit tricky in that. I guess it goes to show there's actually quite a lack of decent central midfield players that are English at the moment. I mean, obviously Bellingham's coming through, but others there's not too many about. I wanted to talk about before we go on to the defence, I want to talk about the forwards. And a lot of people feeling perhaps that Ivan Toney should have got the nod instead of Callum Wilson. And maybe Tammy Abraham could have felt slightly hard done by as well, although admittedly he hasn't had a very good season for Roma. Toney, obviously on this, as this graphic here shows, that he's only behind Saka, Maddison and Kane in terms of goals and assists in the Premier League from English players since the start of last season. Playing for a side like Brentford, I think it's pretty impressive for him to even be on that list. But given kind of perhaps they don't create as many chances as some of the top sides do. I really like him as a player. I was really disappointed in Southgate that he didn't get any minutes when he was called up for the Nations League doubleheader last time round. Why do you think he's gone with Callum Wilson over Ivan Toney?
So the way I can look at it from Southgate's perspective, and also this is the decision I agree with least from him. I can imagine he's picked it so he has a very different option up front to Harry Kane. If you look at Ivan Toney and Kane, Kane, they're not the same players, but neither of them offer particular sort of speed in behind. They both offer hold up and link up play. Whereas Wilson is a lot more of an outlet, someone to get in behind the defence and race in. And it's the same. I think that's why he's gone with him over Abraham or Toney, because like having that completely different profile of striker to Harry Kane just makes the squad a bit more flexible. But my issue with it is that Callum Wilson is so injury prone that how can you guarantee that he doesn't play even a few minutes, or in training he doesn't get injured and just gets ruled out of the World Cup? I think you can get replacements in quickly, but I think Wilson going in is a little bit of a risk for me. I personally would have taken Abraham. I know he's not been in golden form for a Roma this season, but 17 goals in the league last year, 9 goals in the Conference League last year. And he's played, I think he's got quite sizable England experience as well. He's not particularly impressed, but who does in this Gareth Southgate attack? I was quite shocked when Abraham didn't go in and Wilson did. I can understand Southgate's thinking, but personally, I probably would have gone with Tammy Abraham.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because if we're being perfectly honest, the backup striker is realistically not going to play much football at all at this World Cup, because Kane essentially is going to play every minute. And unless a game's done and dusted with maybe, say, 10, 15 minutes to go, you might bring him off for a rest. But you're very much there to basically play if Kane's injured or to play when he needs a rest. But I don't know. I think Callum Wilson is a good player, but as you say, injury prone. And I know he's been injured at the start of the season, but he doesn't get into the Newcastle side ahead of Isaac, for me, when he's fit. So, I mean, I think Toney can consider himself hard done by, but I get your point. I think it's probably a fair point in terms of that Southgate perhaps probably thinks that Toney's a little bit similar in profile to Kane. I'd probably say he was more of a target man than Kane was, and I guess Abraham's still a little bit raw. So I suppose, I don't know. I think this is one where I think Toney can. If I was Ivan Toney, I'd probably just go and play for Jamaica now instead. I just don't think the England opportunity is really gonna come anymore, which is disappointing, because I think he does deserve it, and he probably could offer something at this level. In terms of the striking options, Marcus Rashford is in the squad, having been out of the previous squads. I personally don't feel he should have been picked. I don't think he's that good a player. I don't think he's been in the best of form for United. Yes, it's kind of improved in the last few weeks, but I don't see how Rashford really plays any minutes ahead of the likes of Saka, Grealish, Foden, Sterling, Kane in this England setup. I mean, can you understand why he's picked Rashford at all?
I think he's been a little better this season than we might give him credit for. He's got a few goals. I've got him on a fantasy team. He's done me very well. And I mean, I know last season for Manchester United, he was not particularly good at all. It has to be said. But he is, face facts, he is one of the most experienced England players. And that is something that Southgate is going to value very highly. I think he's also someone that the nation really gets behind, especially after what happened at the Euro. So maybe there's some more off the field issues to do with it, but at the same time, I'm kind of happy to see Marcus Rashford on a football pitch. It doesn't bother me so much. I mean, we've spoken about Toney, spoken about Abraham, but for me, I think Rashford does well in an England shirt, and you got to think that Southgate's been in the role for a very long time, and I think he values players who know exactly what he's trying to do on the pitch and exactly what he's going to try and do to opposition teams. That's probably why you don't see him call many players up. I think Gallagher has got in because he's good at following instructions, and he's already made his England debut, and also he's got the energy to kind of carry out the role. Rashford, I think, is going because he knows exactly what Southgate's going to try and do, and he should be able to execute it. And he's been, I think he's in decent form this season. I think he's United's top scorer. I believe, off the top of my head, might be wrong on that.
I mean, is it a surprise, or I don't know if that's concerning, but there's very little change from the Euros squad to this World Cup squad. Obviously, Sancho's not in it, and Reece James and Chilwell both missing through injury. But otherwise, it's pretty much the same squad. I mean, do you think that's a problem, or it just goes to show that, Southgate, once you're kind of in his plans, regardless of how you're playing for your club, you're pretty much always going to be picked?
Neither, to be honest, actually. I think I'm quite bullish. At national level is the only time I can have a little bit of bias. And I'm Southgate as his critics. I was slamming him before the Euros, but personally, I think he gets undercut quite often now by people online. I think the Euros are a great success, and
I just think he's a poor tactician.
His
in-game management's awful.
I don't know. I think with Italy, he did drop back and get too defensive, but it's the first time England had ever been in a final for years. So I'm willing to forgive him for that, especially since he's done the best of any English manager since Sir Alf Ramsey. And people will say that people always say things like, he had an easy draw both times, but for Christ's sake, in 2016, we got knocked out to Iceland in the round of 16. Like, England have never been a team that sweeps away all before them until they play the big boys. We're a team that underperforms consistently. So to get to a semi-final and a final, a team that got to World Cup final in Croatia, and to lose to Italy on penalties, I think it's more than happy to take pretty much the same squad as he did this time 18 months ago or less than that. I think it's fair enough, to be honest.
I think either way, whatever happens, I think this will be his last tournament. I think you need to bring someone fresh in, and I think he's probably taken it as far as he can. If I'm being perfectly honest, but that's a diff.
I'd agree with that. I'd hope after this tournament he stays in the FA. I hope he moves upstairs, because I think whatever anyone says, his experience is definitely going to be invaluable. We've seen the benefits of him staying in this role and building something up. But you compare it to I've grown up under Capello, under Hodgson. I can't name
McLaren.
I can't name a single thing that they did that was anywhere near as noteworthy of what Southgate's done since he took over.
No, I do think that's fair. I'm just not a fan of him. I just think I just don't like him that much. I respect what he's done, but I just think he's boring. I know not everyone can be charismatic, but I don't know. I just think some of his in-game management's poor. I think his blind faith in certain players is gonna end up hurting him. But yeah, we'll have to see. But in terms of defence, I think this is the one area which I think there's the most gripes with in terms of who's been picked, who hasn't been picked, the balance of it as well. I think defensively the balance is a little bit poor in this squad, because you look at it and there's one recognised left back in the squad in Luke Shaw. We know Trippier's going to play there. Kyle Walker hasn't played football for a while, so he'll take a little bit of time to get himself fit. Ben White is rightly in, but for me, it's the centre backs where I've got the problem. Cody, I know he's had an okay season for Everton, but to pick the likes of Cody and Eric Dyer over, say, the likes of Fikayo Tomori, I know Trevor Chalobah was never really going to get picked, and for some reason he never seems to even be in the conversation with England. But I think for Tomori to be overlooked, I think it's a little bit. I don't agree with it at all, because he's such a better defender than the likes of Dyer, than the likes of Cody. And I think he's probably been harshly judged on those two Champions League games against Chelsea where he didn't play well. And I think that's a little bit unfair, because what he's done at AC Milan he's been phenomenal there. Serie A winner last season, one of their best players. And if Paolo Maldini thinks you're a decent defender, I think you're pretty much on the right track. I just wanted to look at this that was tweeted out by We Love the 72, the EFL. And they're just saying, I think I do agree with it, that the England squad has lacked is the understanding of different footballing cultures. Every other nation has players from all over the world, and it's benefited them. Tomori has proved one thing: if you go abroad, then you won't be picked. Bellingham is the only player. Trippier was already in the setup. The point is, he'll favour a PL player if there's not much between two players. If he's not picked because of his performances against Chelsea, then that adds more weight to the PL bias. It also doesn't help he's a centre half. Sancho got in the side because he had over 30 goal involvements in the Bundesliga. It's a lot harder to distinguish between two defenders than it is to look at forwards whose numbers are goals and assists. Do you think that is fair? Do you think Southgate does have a heavy PL bias?
I think that there's a lot to unpack here. I think the first thing we should say is that I think Southgate does have a bit of a Premier League bias, but I think every national team manager has a bias towards their players in their own country, and the fans do too a bit. I mean, I've been reading a lot on like what different nations and fans are saying about like their team going forward to World Cup. In Brazil, they like bemused to why Gabigol isn't going, and they're confused why Gabriel Martinelli is going to the World Cup. When players move abroad, like you do put yourself at a slight disadvantage. I think, but I would meet in the middle and say that Bellingham is proof that you can be young, you can be raw, and you can be good enough to get into the England setup. I think the problem with Sancho was when he played. I mean, whenever I saw him for England, he was absent from the game. I don't mean on the bench. When he played, he was not particularly good, in my opinion. With Tomori, he's been much better than he's not been much better than Sancho was at Dortmund, but Tomori's been very good for AC Milan. And I think he has been somewhat harshly judged on those two Champions League games. However, where I will draw the line is that he hasn't been flawless in Serie A this season. He's been good, but not perfect. Milan defensively haven't been great either. They've conceded 14 goals in 14 games, which is a worse defensive record than last season. And I think Southgate's put a bit of emphasis on form going into this tournament for the players he has picked. And if I'm Southgate, I'm trying to defend him, I would say Tomori in those two Chelsea games, while it's just two games, they were very big ones, probably a similar sort of pressure and level that you'd face at the World Cup. And if you can't cope with Chelsea, then it's understandable why you would question if you can cope with like World Cup teams. When I'd start really going in on Southgate is if after this tournament Tomori is not getting picked and not getting put ahead of the likes of Cody, of the likes of like Harry Maguire or Eric Dyer and Cody, really. But on those defenders, what we have to remember is that they are part of Southgate's leadership group, which sounds a bit irritating. Like it sounds almost like made up, but he's put a big emphasis on leadership, and it's clearly bore fruit. Connor Cody is someone that I was talking to a couple of Everton fans earlier. Players in the England setup when they're interviewed, unprovoked, they will bring up Connor Cody and his leadership and how much of a big influence he is in that dressing room. And they aren't Dyer and Cody, they've been in decent form. So I don't think it's a crime to take them over Tomori. I'm not sure what I'd do personally. I genuinely don't know. But I think it's a little more balanced and nuanced than the issue potentially is.
Do you think though do you think it's right though that if you as a young British player take the plunge, go to a different country, go to a different league, and doesn't matter how well you perform, like your chance of getting picked for England diminish? And like obviously Sancho's a different example because it's hard to ignore the numbers that he was posting when he was in the Bundesliga, and the same for Bellingham in terms of his performances. But I mean, I just think wherever you play, like I don't know if I don't want to say Southgate disrespects other leagues, but I think it could be close to that, and he probably would. I mean, to be honest, how many Milan games do we reckon Gareth Southgate has watched? He probably has judged it on watching him against Chelsea.
He has gone to watch Milan at times. You've seen him in the San Siro, so he does put the work in. But I do agree. I do think he has a bit of a Premier League bias. like for right or wrong reasons. The right reasons might be that the Premier League's the best league in the world. So players who are performing in that league over a league that might be viewed as inferior, it might get that. On the other hand, Tomori has been performing for one of Europe's best teams in a complex system to a very high level, and no one expected him to break into the team that young. And he offers recovery speed that none of the defenders, the centre backs we have in the team, can actually offer. That's the argument. That's the main argument for Gorman. It's really hard to argue against it. I think it's a very 50-50 issue, and I do think it's. I find it hard to say one side is right and the other side is wrong. I think there's different reasons for picking Tomori and not picking him, and it just depends on what side of the line you follow.
And in terms of Trevor Chalobah, obviously, like again, another young defender, in really good form for Chelsea. I think one of the most exciting young English defenders. Maybe that's a slight bit of bias on my behalf, but I do think he's a really good player. Never seems to be in the conversation for England. I mean, he wasn't really ever going to make the squad, if we're being perfectly honest, but it doesn't mean that he perhaps shouldn't have done. What do you think? Do you think he's got an England future? Are you surprised that he's not really in the conversation much when it comes to English defenders?
Yeah, I mean, I was just checking off camera to see if he. Well, I think he was born in Sierra Leone. I am reading off Wikipedia, I'll be honest. I've always thought I think he grew up in England. So you're right, though. It is a bit odd he's not in the England conversation. Until you mentioned it, I hadn't even thought of it myself. I guess he's just a little too raw. Like I mean, I was one of his big proponents. I remember sitting on Chelsea streams in the summer of 2021 saying, look, you've got Lukaku coming in, have fun, but Trevor Chalobah coming back on loan at Lorient, enjoy him. He's been brilliant. He'll be great for you. So I do rate him highly, but I don't think he's on the level. He's definitely not on the level for Fikayo Tomori, and if Tomori's not getting in, then Chalobah's not getting in. But I do agree he should be in the conversation more because, if Tomori's in the conversation, Chalobah should probably be on the edges of it.
And then I just wanted to touch on what a couple of things before we round out. Harry Maguire's inclusion. It was never in doubt. He was always going to play. Southgate has got blind faith in him, in my opinion. But how much of a problem is it, in your opinion? Because Maguire now is basically fourth choice centre back at Man United. He's not playing any games for them. Even in Europa League, he doesn't really seem to start many games in that competition either. How concerned are you by his lack of football and his kind of seemingly I don't want to say fall from grace as such, but from going from the most expensive defender, captaining Man United, playing most weeks, to now basically playing virtually no club football and still being picked for the national side? I don't know. I think it makes a bit of a mockery of being picked on merit, because Maguire clearly isn't. Maguire's basically picked on because what he did in the Euros.
Yeah, but I don't think Southgate says he picks on merit so much. That's he's trying to change the culture in that aspect, whether rightly or wrongly, to I'm going to pick players who perform for England. But the problem with Maguire is, I think we remember, it's just after the Euros. It was when he'd been arrested in Greece and all that mess. And he had a horror show for England. So if you go off more recent performances, then it is questionable whether he should get in or not. I reckon this is his last chance, really, to prove himself as a good defender. And I reckon he has got in, because whenever he's played for England at a major tournament, he's been brilliant. Like, I remember the 2018 World Cup, there was a reason Man United bought him. He was one of the best defenders at the tournament, period. And at the Euros, again, he was great. And it's worth saying as well, the fall of Harry Maguire over the past 12 months has been frightening. But I remember Manchester United fans were devastated. They were going into the Europa League final with him injured. And I think this is a disaster. We can't go in without Harry Maguire. So it's not as if he's been terrible for years. It's really been over like the last season. And I do wonder if he's out of the squad at Manchester United at the moment, maybe more for not personal reasons, but he's clearly lost so much confidence. Maybe Ten Hag has taken him completely out of the limelight, not necessarily because of his ability, but maybe a little bit more because like the guy just needs a break. That said, he probably wouldn't get into the team over Lisandro Martinez and Rafael Varane. Yeah,
and is he even better than Lindelof? Probably not. So yeah,
I don't know. I think he's probably less well rounded than Lindelof, but You can't. He's a genuine threat from set pieces. Like
Yeah, I
England.
mean, I do think I think it is a concern heading into a tournament with basically one of your what you would say is your main starting centre back alongside John Stones, who has played virtually no football in the build up to it. That's going to be that for me is a concern. Just to round out on the defence in general, what do you think of the balance of the defenders that have been picked? Obviously, Kyle Walker's been out for a while with injury. We don't know how long it's going to take him to get up to full fitness. He would perhaps play right side of a three. You've got Ben White in, who's been in superb form for Arsenal this season, actually at right back, ironically, rather than centre half. But does having only one specialist left back in the squad, do you think that's a problem? I mean, obviously Trippier will probably play there at times. What are your thoughts on the makeup of that defence? Because I've seen a lot of people saying it's not particularly balanced. I'm not really sure where I sit on it, because you look at it and I know it's not. I look at it and I think it's not the greatest, if I'm being perfectly honest.
Yeah, I think it's. I was going to say it's balanced because you have Saka can slot in at left wing back, but on the same note, I'm with you. I don't think it's a rich defense, and for once, I don't think that's Southgate's fault necessarily. No. I think that is he's been done in by Ben Chilwell and Reece James getting injured. That's a big blow. He's going to be relying completely on Luke Shaw. So yeah, those. I mean, I'm more worried about. I'm more worried about Trent Alexander-Arnold, because if Luke Shaw gets injured, then more than likely Trent is going to be playing at right wing back with Trippier going left wing back, or maybe it will be Saka. But I don't want to see Trent personally in the form he's in. I think he could be a really good player for England going forward, but at the moment this is not the time. And I guess that's another note. I do not want to see Trippier at left wing back. Every time Southgate's done it, it's not worked. He's not done it properly at Major Tournament. I think he did it against. I want to say Croatia in Euro 2021. It was Croatia, the first game, wasn't it?
First one in the group stage. Yeah, first one in the group stage.
Yeah, good memory there. Trippier played left back, wing back then, and I hated it. That's one thing I can't get on board with. So as long as I don't see that, it might work. And to be honest, if no one gets injured, that defense could do really well. It's just if one player gets injured, then England's going to be ropey in defense.
You could also probably apply that. You're a Harry Kane injury away from an absolute disaster in attack as well. So, it is very fine margins. Just to round out then, mate, what are your overall thoughts on the squad then? Like, how do you see England doing? I mean, do you like the look of this squad? Do you think it's good enough to go deep into the tournament? What are your thoughts on it?
So here's the thing. I tweeted it just before I came on. This is the best way I can sum up my feelings towards England. I can't think of a team who can genuinely comfortably beat us in a game of football. The issue is, I can't think of a team that England can comfortably beat in a game of football. They're so hard to predict, because you know they're not going to concede, but you don't know if they're going to score a goal. So it's impossibly hard to call. And as an England fan, I look at the squad, and I don't want to say it fills me with confidence, but it doesn't fill me with dread. I'm really torn on how I feel with them. But I do have a genuine belief with Gareth Southgate. I've gone from one of his main critics to, after the Euros, I feel like I don't have a choice other than to be saying, you know what, give the guy a chance. I don't have a reason to say he can't do well in this tournament. I genuinely have hopes he'll get us to a final. Like, I feel like that is possible. In the same breath, I feel like we could be out in the round of 16, like losing to Senegal because we can't score a goal. It's just really hard to call.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I personally feel that, I think his race is run in terms of like very rarely do teams do well 3 tournaments in a row, unless you're that ridiculous Spain side where you win Euros, World Cup, Euros. But very rarely do you see teams do well across 3 tournaments. I would be very surprised if England got to the semi-finals or the final. I really do think that the form in the build-up to the tournament has been shocking. That Nations League campaign was terrible. People say, "Oh, it's only the Nations League," but it's still football matches. And we were terrible. A lot of causes for concern there. Not good defensively, not great going forward either.
My counter would be that we were. I was saying the exact same things you're saying before the Euros. I said we look horrific in every single game. We can't score a goal, and then we got to the final.
And we were terrible in the group stage of the Euros as well. I remember actively on here and other places slamming Southgate and the team for how shit they were at the Euros, and then we got out of the group stage and we obviously did okay. So
I think
Yeah,
the main thing with England, though, I think we've all got to promise ourselves that all the people that say that, you know, like you say, are shocked if we get to the semi-finals. If we now reach the semi-finals, you can't walk back and say we should have won it. You have to come and say, you know what, he beat my expectations. If I see, because that's what happens after the Euros, right? That's what irritated me. Because I said I can't see England get past the round of 16. We got to the final and said, you know what, you beat my expectations. If I see people saying, oh, we're not going to get out of the group stage, we're so bad. We get to the final and they say, oh, we should have won it. Southgate's so bad. You have to go, no, he beat your expectations. You can't shift the goalpost during the tournament.
Yeah, no, I think I think that is a fair point. I mean, it's hard not to, because obviously, you know, football's emotional and you know, you say things and whatnot. But yeah, look, if we get to the semi-finals and we lose in the semi-finals, then that's better than my expectations were at the start. So I guess you can't really be that annoyed. But then the flip side, if you're in the semi-finals and you lose, you're going to be annoyed about it as well. So it's just finding that balance. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Obviously, World Cup getting underway. I think about a couple of weeks time. About a week or is it
next
1 or
week.
2 weeks? Is it next week?
It's next Sunday.
Oh Jesus, yeah. So in about 10 days' time, it's getting underway. So yeah, we'll have to see how England get on. But yeah, I think that's a good point to round out. Alex, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it, guys. Make sure you check out Alex across multiple social media platforms as Euro Expert. I've linked them all in the description below, so go and follow him on there for some comprehensive insight into European football. From myself, please make sure you smash the likes on the way out. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And I'll be back tomorrow with a preview for the Newcastle United game on Saturday, which is probably going to be very depressing, but we'll be here anyway. So please make sure you come and tune in. But yeah, guys, until then, take care and catch you soon.